Trump looking like Brad Pitt or George Clooney?
Which one do you want?
I'll take either. Good morning. I liken the current state of public education in New York State to being the Titanic, a huge, expansive, and expensive, unsinkable ship. That ship has a captain and crew consisting of hundreds of school administrators, teachers, and support staff. It has many amenities and many mandates as well that must be paid for. That ship is fueled primarily by school property taxes and state aid. There is a class structure aboard that ship whereby many students find themselves in first class because they reside in wealthier school districts with wide and deep tax bases that provide them with the very best education that money can buy. Unfortunately, there are too many students below deck who reside in poorer districts with limited tax bases, districts that have difficulty providing the basics of good education. This Titanic has hit the iceberg being the 2% property tax cap. I understand the rationale behind the tax cap and the need to throw a lifeline to property taxpayers. But instead of throwing a life jacket to school boards and educators aboard that Titanic, we threw them instead a straitjacket. With no control over rising costs, especially contractual salaries and increases in health insurance and pension costs, we tied their hands, leaving them with no recourse but to throw many staff and programs overboard. Upstate rural districts in particular have been hard hit. The State Comptroller's Office just last week released its findings that for the next budgetary cycle, the property tax cap will once again be 2%. Let's take this Titanic of public school education and run it right back into the same iceberg. Who and what will we throw overboard this time? Public education in New York State is sinking. Ironically, school property taxes are still going up. For what little we are helping beleaguered taxpayers, we are severely hurting public school students across the state. Public school teachers in New York are certified by the State of New York according to criteria determined by the state. They are licensed by the state. The state has developed the guidelines for the granting of tenure. As developed and adopted by the State Education Department, they teach according to guidelines and syllabi that cover every discipline and curriculum, from pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, in every subject area, from physics to physical education, economics, health, math, special education, art, music, and so on. Those syllabi are under continuous scrutiny and revision and are based on measurable goals, objectives, and standards. No Child Left Behind triggered a national obsession with the need for standards and standardized tests in order to hold both students and educators accountable. For decades, we have had educational standards in New York State, as well as standardized tests to measure them. Many of you, I am sure, suffered and threaded through those infamous Regents examinations, competency tests, and performance evaluations administered throughout the grades. Numerous unpaid mandates have created specific and often rigorous requirements that by law must be met and paid for. As of just this September, as part of the qualification for Race to the Top funding, teachers are now subject to the APPR, the Annual Professional Performance Review. Public education in New York is defined, controlled, and regulated by the State Board of Regents, the Commissioner of Education, the State Education Department, the state legislature, and some 700 local school boards of education. It is my contention that public school professional staff, administrators, and teachers, however indirect, work for the state of New York, are employees of the state of New York, and therefore should be paid by the state of New York. I'll repeat that. All public school professional and certified staff, including administrators and teachers, should be paid directly by the state of New York. The major bulk of any public school budget are those monies appropriated for the payment of the salaries, health insurance benefits, and the pension costs of the professional staff members. Those costs alone easily account for much more than 50% of the expenditures of a public school budget. To transfer those costs, and only those costs, to the state would result in drastic reductions in local public school budgets and, in turn, sizable decreases in school property taxes. Less wealthy districts have always been hindered in their educational offerings simply because of the costs generated by providing the necessary classroom teacher. If the state were covering those costs, rural, isolated, and lower-income districts would now have the flexibility to provide for educational courses and offerings they haven't been able to afford. The argument will be quickly made that to make such a transfer of these costs from 700 local public school districts to the state would jeopardize or violate collective bargaining rights. Not so. Representative teams of the state teachers' unions would engage in direct negotiations with the state concerning wages, health care, and pension benefits. There would now be the opportunity through the collective bargaining process to equalize teacher salaries across the entire state, whereby teachers with similar educational backgrounds and years of experience who are employed in districts with similar enrollments, tax bases, and costs of living would be paid the same. Likewise, all public school professional staff members would be provided with the same identical health insurance benefits and coverages at the same identical cost. The extension of those benefits in retirement would be the same as well. And yet again, taking into account the current tiered system concerning retirement pension benefits, all professional public school employees would be afforded the same benefit packages, even including early retirement incentives, at the same cost. Many will argue that the negotiation of one contract governing all public school professional employees eliminates the competition we currently have with local negotiations in 700 local school districts. Not so. One contract would help to level the playing field for all public school professional staff. We are not in the business of buying teachers or selling education. Now, to pay for this, New York should use earned income and/or investment income as the revenue base from which to generate the funds needed to pay the salaries and benefits of public school professional staff members. The funds would be collected by employers as payroll deductions, similar to Social Security, from employees and periodically forwarded to the state. The payroll deductions would be progressive and indexed in that the more one makes, the more they would take. These deductions would be capped and a ceiling established beyond which no payroll deduction would be required. Those drawing their incomes from investment earnings would pay their contributions at the filing of their annual income tax. Am I proposing that we rob Peter to pay Paul? No. The revenue base derived from income is far greater than the base derived from assessed property. But it's a tax, it's a tax, it's a tax. Yes, it is. But a much fairer tax by which we would be able to generate revenues from a greater tax base as opposed to always increasing school property taxes on property owners. Though there are many issues of concern in this election year, finding alternative or supplemental sources of funding for public school education is major. This plan provides a direction toward those resources. Thank you.